Hey, we've driven thousands of miles all and up and down the East Coast to test our new internet solution and to see how it would work. If you're planning from working from the road, RVing full time, or maybe you're going to go boondock but want to be able to watch movies and also send emails, maybe upload videos, then you're going to need fast, reliable internet. And for that, I think I have the answer right behind me. Now, let me go ahead and say, the answer is not one thing, but if you're really wanting to do this, you're going to need a couple of options. You're going to need your primary option, your backup, and your tertiary option. And I have the perfect setup right behind me. And that's what we're going to explore today as we drive across the country and test these systems out in different locations and see how well does this work. So in order of priority, I have T-Mobile, Starlink, and then a backup cell phone. The way we did this is we went in order of priority. The first thing, because it's always hooked up, is I would try the T-Mobile. It's always hooked up, it's very fast. If it didn't work, I would go to Starlink. If Starlink didn't work, then the last resort would be to go to the iPhone. Now, why the iPhone as a last resort? Because it has a limited amount of data you can use. It's limited to 50 gigabytes per month. So it's the last resort. So the first stop we had in this experiment was right outside Asheville at East Asheville KOA. And man, look at these speeds. They are amazing. This is on the T-Mobile, so that's all we had to use. The upload speeds were literally the best I've ever seen. Another note with T-Mobile is it can operate off batteries, so you don't even have to plug it in for a few hours. And you could actually carry it in the cab of your truck or other vehicle if you wanted to. So it's pretty handy. Another advantage of the T-Mobile and of the iPhone is I can put them in my backpack and take them to me when I'm not traveling by RV. So, I have internet anywhere I go. The next stop we tried internet out was in Pigeon Forge at a resort called Margaritaville. Now, the T-Mobile worked just about like it did in Asheville, so no need to get anything else out. But given that we had a good spot, I did try out the Starlink, and it had good results. It would have worked for anything we wanted to do, but it wasn't even a quarter of the speeds that we were getting out of T-Mobile. Next, in transport, we stopped at a Buc-ee's, as we often do, and decided to stay there for lunch, turned on the air conditioning, and I made a few business calls. And of course, I needed internet for video conference, and once again, T-Mobile came through. Before turning back and heading north and east, we stayed at Nashville, and once again, T-Mobile was all we had to try out. It worked really well there with really high speeds again. And we made a long trip over to Flatwoods, West Virginia. This was the first place we ran into some trouble as T-Mobile just couldn't pick up enough signal to work. No T-Mobile here. AT&T's doing great. I'll watch a little television. It's beautiful. Didn't put the Starlink up high, just put it on the table, but we're getting enough to watch television. Just pointing straight up. So we'll go watch TV. In fairness, we did not need internet at this location except to watch a little TV, so I didn't put Starlink in the ideal location. It worked okay for a little while, and then it started to lose signal, and we had to switch over to AT&T. Now, the reason we don't like to watch TV on AT&T is we only have 50 gigabytes of data on that phone, but we have a little bit of a cheat. Yeah. So one of my favorite cheats is if I have to use the iPhone. When used as a hotspot, you only get 50 gigabytes per pay period. A way to get around this is if you have something like a Fire Stick or Apple TV, like we do, you mirror the phone. That way you play the movie over the phone, not using it as a hotspot, and you have unlimited internet. I would never use the hotspot to watch television because it would just burn up your 50 gigabytes too quickly. Our next stop had us meeting up with Patrick and Patty from Travels with Delaney and some of their great friends in Pennsylvania. Now, we had such a great time eating their food that we really didn't get a lot of time to watch TV or play on the internet, but the T-Mobile worked well enough that we could watch TV and do anything we needed. Leaving Pennsylvania, we headed up towards New York, where we met up with Bobby and April and their children with Travels Abound, and we found here that once again, we got really good speeds with T-Mobile. Not as good as we were getting in some other places, but plenty enough to do video conferences, telephone, and watch television. Continue to make our way north as we were heading towards the destination of Montreal. We were told there would be no internet at the next location through any provider, but we found that T-Mobile did have service. However, this would not be true at our next site, even further north, where we would have to go to Starlink. Well, after a number of stops here at the very top of New York, right on the Canadian border, is the first time we had to put up the satellite, but it's working great. It's kept us online all day, able to stream, join video calls, working great. Leaving New York, we made our way up to Montreal, where we only attempted to use AT&T because we knew we could use AT&T in Canada, and then we headed back down to Stowe, Vermont. Once again, the T-Mobile worked well enough that we didn't have to try anything else, though it did have a weak signal. I think it's important to know too that the T-Mobile only costs $50 a month with no equipment investment. Starlink, however, has very heavy upfront costs to buy the equipment, around $600. Then you have to pay $135 a month for the service, though you only have to pay for the months you want to use with the RV service. The additional AT&T phone was actually the cheapest, as I already had an old phone, and it turned out by adding an additional phone to the service, I hit the multi-phone plan, and it brought my bill down $20. Now back to the experiment and travel. After leaving Vermont, we headed south and stayed again in New York, where we found mixed results with our internet, but was sufficient enough with T-Mobile to work. From there, we headed into Hershey's, Pennsylvania, where we found the T-Mobile was actually quite excellent. Unfortunately, our next stop in Virginia, we actually had horrible internet on all three. It just wasn't workable. However, by the time we hit our last spot and experiment for this test in South Carolina, we had excellent coverage again, once again with T-Mobile. So my conclusion is, if you're going to go full-time, or you're thinking you're going to try to work or do school while on the road, you really need at least 3 systems. Plus, I think what you'll find is that if you use these 3, it'll work really well on the East Coast. Now, if you're towards the west, especially out in places like Utah, Starlink may be your first way you want to go.